Welcome everyone to my first playthrough of OpenTTD. And for my first series, I'm going to be playing with the default graphics, the default train set, and really just as it comes out of the box. In later series, I'll be playing with some of the mods and newGRFs that you can get, some different train sets and different settings, but with this, it's going to be pretty much as is out of the box. I did change some of the settings with vehicles, like realistic acceleration, realistic loading times, stuff like that. But overall, pretty much going to be as is. And I can show you the setting options in the OTTD.cfg file that all the settings are saved in, if you'd like that. But this is one of my favorite games. I like to joke that I was born with a computer mouse in my hands, because some of my earliest memories are playing this game, playing the original Transport Tycoon, playing Transport Tycoon Deluxe, and I was really happy when I discovered this game in college that this port was available. And yeah, I've probably sunk way too much time of my life into this game, but I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorites, and I come back to it constantly. So what I'm going to do is just new game, choose the map size. If you want to get close to the original experience as possible, no more than 256 by 256. That was the maximum in the original game, but we're actually going to do 512 by 512. Land generator, again, if you want to be original, go original, but we'll do Terragenesis. Number of towns normal, that's fine. Start date, we'll start at 1950 and go all the way through 2050 in the series. Just a full playthrough of the game. Terrain type, I think I'll do mountainous. Number of industries, normal, that's fine. Variety of distribution, so what this will do, if it's set to none, it'll be like the original game. It'll be very chaotic and not have much sense to it. Low will round off any mountains and create a much more flatter terrain. Medium and high will patch things together, so we'll group things together. So there will be mountain ranges, there will be open fields, there will be patches of lakes. It'll be a much more natural landscape. So we'll set that to high. Sea level, the amount of water that's going to be on your map. Low, we'll do low, that's fine. Rivers, if you want an original experience, set it to none. There were no rivers in the original game, but medium's going to be fine for us. And tree algorithm, again, if there's an original option, set it to original. And then if you want an original experience, all four sides of the map should be water, but we'll actually just let it do random, make things a little bit more interesting and unpredictable. And yeah, here we go. Alright, so oops, had town transparency on from a previous game. So this is the map. I have the setting on where it starts paused, just so we can look things over and find where we want to start. Now, so this is the mini map. I like starting, so with these you can look at, if you hover your mouse over it, it'll give you a little tooltip. So land and contours, vehicles, industries, that's what we want. And then I'm going to turn off the town names. And then here are all the industries, all the industry chains that are on the map. And if you click one, it'll remove the icons from the mini-map. But if you control click, that was F5. If you control click, it'll remove all but the one you clicked, and it'll toggle. So I actually like starting with the, in the original game, with the original factories, I like starting with the iron ore factory chain because it has an actual chain. So you can go from iron ore to the steel mill, and then from the steel mill you can go to the factory, and from the factory you can go back to a town with goods. So let's see if that town's big enough to accept goods. 465, I don't think it will be, but I might. No, it does. Yeah, perfect. So we'll do a cargo station there. We'll go ahead and just do 7 for the platform length. For your first train line, you probably don't need 2 stations except for at the primary industry, but that's just what we'll do for this one. It'll be fine. And then put one there. We will go to... Let's see, we'll go to this one. I think that'll be easier. Which side do I want it on now? We'll go for this one. We'll try to terraform as little as possible. I have terraforming and construction expenses on high. Now, when you place a station, you're going to want a blank rail tile on whichever way the traffic comes into the station. That way you can put a signal on the end of it that will control the train traffic flow. I was thinking about making this a terminus station, which means that trains come in only in one direction and then turn around and leave the same direction that they went in. But I actually think I'll go roll-on, roll-off, row-row station, which means it comes in one direction and then can keep going out the other end, just to keep that flowing. And then we have this factory here. Building on farm tiles is incredibly expensive. It's much more expensive than like building on clear tiles. So we'll build the station out here, and then if we have to move it around, we'll have to go through it. We'll have to make our train lines go through it, but that'll be fine. So then we have the general idea of where the stations are, or the tracks need to go, so we'll just head to it. Now, when you turn the train 90 degrees, it slows the train down. If you go 90 degrees within, so our train length is 7 tiles, so if we go 90 degrees in less than 7 tiles, it'll slow the train down. So we'll see how long we can actually get this before turning into the station. That's going to be a bit much, just for the lay of the land. But ideally, if you don't want your trains to slow down, you would, if you have a train length of 7, you would build this out here and then have it come in that way, and that won't slow your trains down. But doesn't seem like we're going to be able to do that in the land that we have. I don't actually need that to be a double track. It's going to come. That's going to be a row. All right, just straight there. Go straight there. You want to try to space out your incline, like when your train has to go uphill, especially if you have realistic train acceleration on. That way your trains don't lose as much momentum, and then they can keep going up and down hills without slowing down too much. If you have original train acceleration on, then that's going to contribute much more to needing to calculate the tractive effort and power that you need to buy in your engines, but we'll get into that. So now we'll go like that. Let's see. We'll try to. We'll go around this town. A little bit extra bit of line, but you can. So gear icon, transparency options. These buttons down here will toggle whether it's completely invisible if that button's active, or if it has this like transparent effect where you can still see it but it's transparent. Trees can get really dense and annoying, so I like turning those completely off, but I'll often leave everything else on. I think bridges also kind of get disruptive, so I turn those off too. But you know, try just turning the transparency, and if it's still not clear enough, then go ahead and hit that button to make them invisible. So we're going along the town. And so here we're not actually going 90 degrees, we're not actually changing the direction 90 degrees, it's just a 45-degree angle. So that, it doesn't matter what length that is, that won't affect the speed of your trains at all. So as long, especially with like hill climbs and stuff, as long as you keep the uphills all the same direction, rather than swapping between like going southeast or you know, southwest or vice versa, you know. Don't want that there. Go there. How do we'll go like this? We'll try to get as much length as we can. Perfect. That way it doesn't have to deal with both a hill and I guess it's going downhill here, so that wouldn't have mattered very much. But just make it a bit easier on the train. Can I get that? No. So. And I have the construction and terraforming costs set to high. But you can set those in options to low, medium, or high, just depending on how much. I say challenge loosely. This game isn't exactly hard. That's not really the point of the game. The point of the game is just to have fun building transportation networks. But you know, whatever minimal challenge is here, setting the terrain and construction costs can add a bit to it. So go ahead and bridge over that behind that factory there. Go right on past that sawmill. See, that's uphill, but unless we want to go all the way around that town and still have to deal with hills, that's gonna be okay. I could build a tunnel, but tunnels are expensive and I don't want to do that, so we'll just do that. We will do this though. Not enough cash. Fantastic. So if you shift click, it'll give you an estimated cost of the build action, or I clicked on the bank, that doesn't really do anything. But if you shift click, it'll show you in an error in this info message, estimated cost. And that's really useful for like tunnels and stuff. Tunnel too long. So that's an option you can set, but see 9,000. But if you control click in the bank window, it'll just borrow the maximum or repay the maximum that you can. So we'll just borrow the maximum. And there is an interest cost, and I set that to maximum as well. So we'll try to keep the loan balance as minimal as possible when we're not actively building and buying tracks and vehicles. So I just pressed the R button and that toggles from building to construction. And you can see that if you accidentally build, you do get some money back for train tracks, but roads, bridges, stations, tunnels, anything else, it'll cost you to delete it. But if you're playing with infrastructure costs, then long term you're going to want to delete anything that you're not using. So we're going to go ahead and add a depot right here because we have all the stations connected. And even though I'm not playing with breakdowns, I still like to force trains to maintain themselves just because I think it's fun. and to force trains to into a depot to get maintenance, you can block their pathway like this with a one-way signal for the opposite direction. That way, since trains can't go down this track, they'll automatically go down this track, go into the depot. And then you want, on the entryway into the station, you want a signal as close as possible, just to reduce the wait times, the time it takes the train to get from the signal into the station. And then and then out of the station, you can either have it right here, or for really busy stations, what you can do is you can add like a waiting area outside the station that is at least one more longer than the it's actually two more longer than the train. So your train length plus one tile at each end for signals. And then that way you can free up the station tile while waiting for trains to exit. So that's really useful for really busy stations, but this station is not going to be that busy, so we will just remove that and go back to how it was. Yeah, so what we will do, we'll go ahead and buy a train here, and there's some hills but not much, so we'll just go ahead and buy the best vehicle. That'll give us the best station rating, and there's a variety of things that affect the station rating, and I'll get into that a little bit. So we'll go ahead and buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll buy 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we'll do. And then 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. All right. Yeah, we'll stick with that. Why not? So primary industries give you the cargo that they produce, iron ore, and then you take that to a secondary industry, and they don't produce as much as you put in, and depending on what set you're playing with, that changes a little bit. So you can go ahead and progressively decrease the amount of cars from your primary industry to your secondary industry, and then in the original industries there's not many tertiary industries, but just in this case there is, so you can just decrease the amount, and then you click on the train, click on the arrow button down here, and that brings up the orders panel, and then you click on that station, click on your next station, click on your next station, and then click on the final station. And when you're doing orders, it's a really good time to go through and just verify that your track is all connected, especially especially the 45-degree interchanges, because it's real easy when you're building these diagonal tracks that that connect to the straight tracks. And while I call these straight tracks because they're in line with the squares, and each one of these is one unit, whereas these are diagonal to the squares, although they're horizontal and vertical on screen, and each of these is like a half unit. So these are straight, these are diagonal, despite what it appears on screen. At least that's how I refer to them. Alright, and then so we want to full load at the primary industry, and then here we want to unload and take cargo, but we if you don't tell it to wait, it's just gonna take up what's available, and on your first run, and there's a little bit of delay between dropping off the primary cargo and the production of the secondary cargo. So what I actually like to do is go into, so from the orders panel, you go into the timetable, and then for the secondary and tertiary industries, what I like doing is wait and stay for 4 days. That's a good time for the default. Oh no, not travel. Clear time for the tertiary industry. That's a good time for the default if you're playing with realistic loading speeds and you have longer trains. You may have to increase that if you're or if you have shorter trains, you can decrease that. You can play around with it a bit, but 4 days is what I like starting with, and then you can go back to orders, move along to the factory, unload and take cargo, and then at Findlay Market we want to unload and no loading. So as towns grow, the buildings will destroy and rebuild, and your station may temporarily not accept goods, and you don't want the trains to just reload what they unloaded. So you just want to leave empty. And that's also important if you're playing with cargo distribution, which I don't have that turned on in this one because it's just trying to get close to base game as possible. But that adds another dimension to it. But if you're playing with that, unloading and leave empty is an important thing to remember. And then since we're forcing it to go into that depot, we don't have to tell it to go into the depot. But depending on how long your train loop is and how long its journey is, you may want to explicitly tell it to use a certain depot, because if the maintenance interval comes up, your train may seek out a depot that you don't want it to go, and it could get lost. But this is such a small loop, and it's all enclosed, so we don't have to worry about that quite yet. And then we're ready to go. So I will unpause it and tell my train to go. And while this loads at the station, I'll go ahead and do the signals for this track, because eventually we're going to add more trains this track. So for signals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You want to be able to have a train wait in here without blocking the station. So we'll do that. And then if you control, click, and drag along the track, it'll add the signals all along the track until it reaches a junction, and then it won't add any more past that. But it's much more convenient than doing it all by hand, by like counting out each individual spacing. And then again, as close to the station as the junction allows. There we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can make it less. You can do the spacing less than the length of the train. Especially on like busy routes, you'll decrease the spacing in between each train. But for right now, on this loop, having one train length in between each train is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I didn't count this because it's only a half unit. So this is 1. I don't count the half because you'll end up a half short. So I only count these if there's an even number. Control drag. Now let me. So if you have a signal on this diagonal before you change directions, like I always want to go to the next tile, but can't build signals here. What you have to do is drag in the direction that the signal is facing. So if I do that, then it'll complete the track. But if you, I didn't remove those. Yeah, there we go. But otherwise, it's as you'd expect. So that train is fully loaded. So be sure you're clicked on the depot that you need, and then you clone train, and if you hold control and click on the train, what that'll do is create a shared orders, which is very convenient if your line ever changes. So if we have like 10 trains on this line, it would be really tedious to go in and update every train's orders. If you don't like setting orders, you're probably not going to like this game, because that's the most time-consuming part, is giving orders to all your vehicles, because it has so many steps. But I don't mind it. Sharing orders makes it much better than the original game. So let's say this steel mill closed down, and we had to build another station over here and service this steel mill. We could rebuild the station there, and we'd only have to update the orders in one train or one vehicle that is sharing that set of orders, and all the vehicles with those orders will have their orders updated. So it's much more convenient than having to do it all individually. And then we'll press go and get that train moving. And we'll just wait and see how many trains we actually need on this line. So 120. So if you click on an industry, this window will pop up, and it shows you the production and how much you're transporting. And how much you're transporting depends on your station rating. So if you have a low station rating, the industry is not going to send very much cargo to your station, which kind of feeds back into a negative feedback loop. So if you just have your trains waiting for full load, and you have a really low station rating, it's going to cause them to wait longer to get to a full load, which will negatively impact your station rating. Your station rating is based on the speed of the last train that entered the station. So if you have the fastest train available from the available trains list, if you have the fastest train going to the station, then you'll get maximum points. The interval between arrivals of trains, or vehicles in general. So if we had a road depot connected to this train station, that would count too. Just the interval between arrivals. The faster the intervals, the better the station rating. So again, I'll just clone train, hold control, and click, and go. Citizens arrive. First train arrives at Fondingworth West Station. That's nice of them. But yeah, so station rating is affected by the interval of the trains, and then the last one is how much cargo is waiting at the station. The more cargo waiting, the worse your station rating. So it's really important to keep those high. The two most important ones are the speed. The order of importance is actually the order that I said them in. The order of importance is arrivals, then I believe it's the speed, and then the amount waiting. I believe that's the weights to them. Don't quote me on that. I may have to issue a correction about that. But that's what I believe it is, because you can have a good rating even if you have a few hundred units of cargo waiting, just based on the speed of the trains and the frequency of the arrivals. But yeah, so that's our first train line. So train 1 has completed the loop. So we'll go in and profit this year $24,000. So this line is profitable so far. That is perfect. That's exactly what you want. You want one train to be leaving as the next train arrives. So 3 trains looks like the perfect amount to have. But that will change. You'll have to constantly update your lines. So since we're not going to be building or buying anything right now, we'll just repay as much as we can. Again, hold control and click, and it repays as much as possible. And if you don't know what a button does, just hold your mouse over it a little bit and it'll pop up a little tooltip. But since you're paying interest on your loans, you want to just keep it as low as possible when you're not building. Yeah, so 3 trains looks like is what we need for this line, and that's going to change as new engines become available, new faster engines, and as your rating increases, the higher your rating, the more and like the better serviced an industry is, the more cargo it will produce. So that's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, and with that, we have our first line. It seems to be profitable. Let's see. So minus the setup costs of construction of new vehicles, we'll just disregard that. The train running costs plus the property maintenance, and then the loan interest of what we had to borrow to build this track is only $36,000, and we're making $62,000. So already we're making a profit just from this line, even with high infrastructure costs, construction costs, and terraform and landscaping costs. So yeah, it's not too hard to make a profit in this game. Again, that's not really the challenge. It's just fun, a digital train set, as it were. Just trying to build complex interacting networks. But with that, I think I'm going to cap off this episode, and I hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks for tuning in.